The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you who are not familiar with the A-APRP, we were actually called for / founded in 1968 via Kwame Ture, the first president of Ghana, in 1968 in his Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. For those who are not familiar with our party line and objective, it is Pan-Africanism, which is the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. So if this is your first time listening in to our podcast, you know that we like to honor our ancestors before each episode. Before we get into that, I just wanted to let you guys know this episode will be centered around organizing your community. But once again, just to reiterate back to what I was saying earlier, I have my comrade on here, Winfred, who is going to go ahead and get into the ancestors we commemorate this episode to. Winfred, the floor is yours.
Hey y'all, so our first ancestor is Nana Badu Bonsu II. So not much is known about this king, but Nana Badu Bonsu II was a chief in Ahanta and from Busua, an area in what is now known as Ghana. At the time, in 1837, Ghana was being colonized by the Dutch, and the area was called the Dutch Gold Coast. Nana Badu Bontu fought against the Dutch and eventually died fighting against these colonialists. Interestingly enough, after he died, the Dutch took his head and preserved it in a glass jar full of formaldehyde. And it was found a couple of years ago in Holland. And so his head was pretty recently returned back to Ghana. Our second ancestor is Princess Stella Cigao. She was born in January 1937 in Lucy Kisiki, in what is now known as South Africa, and was one of the first elected cabinet members of Nelson Mandela's South African government, alongside Nkosazana Zuma and Sankey Ndembe Nkondo. As a student, she joined the African National Congress Youth League and later joined the Tranzeki government in October 1987. When Tranzeki was absorbed into South Africa in 1994, she was elected as the Minister for Public Enterprises. This involved attempts at transforming the face of the South African Airways and Transnet until 1999. She later became the Minister of Public Works and served until her death in 2006 of heart failure.
All right. Thank you for that, Winfred. Definitely appreciate that. So I guess just to kick off this combo, I think it'll probably be best to probably start off with asking, how would one go about organizing a community? What do we feel like is the best method or approach into doing so? Or just simply how would one go about it, in your opinion?
I mean, I feel like the first thing is to have, I guess, something to organize around. So like having a goal in mind of like, okay, when we're organized, like, what do you want? Like, what should we be doing? So like, for example, if it's a community, maybe like organizing to make sure that everybody has food or like everybody like has enough to eat. And so for that, I like there are some topics where it's like for the most part, most people agree with it. At least like on an individual level, or most people are like, oh yeah, this is definitely something that we should have. So like for example, like everybody should have access to some form of housing. Everybody should have access to good food. If like landlord isn't treating the tenants right, there should be more rights for the tenants. If there's like a community garden, or like if people want like an opportunity for kids to like learn or like have fun or like just stay safe, like people generally agree with those ideas in the community. Uh, so like really like starting about it is, I guess a good point of like starting is just figuring out like what are things that enough people would be passionate about to do something about, and then from there communicate with the people in the community.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the essence of where it starts, or where it should start, is with asking or figuring out what the community needs are. And I think with understanding that, or how you go about understanding what those community needs are, is actually going out and engaging with folks in the community. So whether it be through surveys, through knocking on doors and filling out, having people fill out surveys and asking questions. I think that's probably one of the best ways, if not the best way, to go about doing that. To figure out, okay, what the needs are. Or if you're building an organization, centered around your community, you may have members that you may have recruited early on who have a good understanding what those needs are. Granted, that's kind of going off of like one or two or a few individual experiences. It is best to do it by going and engaging with folks, right? But I think it wouldn't hurt too to have a good basis by connecting with some members who also live in the community and strategizing around, well, this is what we deem, or this is what we find. But I think another way is also research, maybe trying to do some quick studies, look up some stuff that online or wherever, articles and various materials that you may come across on finding what is needed in the said community. So I think those are that's a good place to start, at least in my opinion, and just first understanding what the needs are, and then obviously organizing around that. So if the main issue is gun violence, or the main issue is lack of resources on various fields, you definitely want to organize around that, because you want to speak to the material needs of your people, because if you don't, then it's going to be hard to organize, and you probably won't have too many people organizing or looking to your org for help or assistance. And that's what we're here for, is because obviously at some point we want to cultivate some sense of revolution, or cultivate that just in general over the course of years. We know it's not just going to happen tomorrow. May not happen in a lifetime, but the only way you foment that is with the people and the masses on your side. So obviously that organization that we build is always going to outlive us. That's the whole point of it. It's like, if we're not able to carry this out in our generation, the next, the org will still be around, so the next generation can take the mantle and push it forward for that.
On the point of research that you mentioned, like I feel like that's definitely something that's vital, because like for most topics, at least in this kind of society, it's usually issues that have been around for decades, if not generations. Uh, if it's not like even if like a symptom is new, like one of the root problems is something that's been around for a long time. And so there's most likely other people who have organized and worked on like fighting for those issues. So like doing that research of like what happened in the community in the past, and like what like organizing efforts worked. Like, are those people still alive? Can they give advice? Or like what methods do they use that are particular to this community? Like it could just give a lot more insight on how to like build organization and how to be effective as an organization wherever you're at.
Exactly. I definitely agree. Just engaging with all types of people, whether they be elders or whatever, right? And doing that research. I think a combination of both is always the best remedy. Instead of trying to, separate them, I think it is best. But obviously, if you're limited in one capacity or another, maybe you don't, for some reason, we don't want to be ableist. You're not able to get out your house as much or whatever, and you can't, whatever. So maybe you need to start doing research first and then find other ways to, reach out to people in the community or get in contact with people in the community. But yeah, I definitely agree. But I guess to follow that up, as two members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, I know we could speak to the importance or the role that ideology, methods, and objectives could play in an organization or organizing work. But I guess for our people listening in or who aren't familiar with the role of ideology or methods and objectives play in organizing work, if we could just elaborate and touch on that a little bit too. So I guess maybe you could speak to that, the role that plays, based off of our experience or stuff we read. Like I know for me, not only do I have the experience in understanding what these things do and how they work in real time, but reading the works of like Kwame Ture and Strategy Tactics of the Revolution. So yeah, if you wanted to take that up too, and then I'll follow up on you.
Yeah, I think we discussed this in an earlier podcast too. So I can start with like the differences between ideology, methodology, and objectives. So like ideology is like basically like your understanding of the world and how the world works, or like how like a system in place is functioning. And like what does it mean for like it kind of has you ask like what does the world look like, and like what do I want to, like how do I understand the world as it is right now. Objectives is like simply what do I want the world to look like given my understanding of the world. So given my ideology, like what are the goals I would have for what society should look like. And methods are the ways in which we get to the ways in which we use our ideology to reach our objectives. I think all three of these are important because they provide some sense of basically like unity of understanding of like what people should be doing. So like let's say we wanted to like, so our goal is to spread Pan-Africanism across the world and get to a point of basically African independence. Um, and so if members of our organization uh, all have that same objective, then we can all take like different actions or different methods to achieve those goals. Uh, and so like regardless of, to some extent, regardless of like whether or not we're doing the exact same thing, we'd all be doing something to achieve our objective. Um, Ideology is important because it helps us understand like what our methods would be. So like ideology is important because it helps us understand what our methods would be and what our objectives should be. So if we had like an ideology that pointed towards like saying that like we don't really need to include Africans across the world, that they're no longer Africans or something, it would limit our methods in terms of like saying that we wouldn't get the chance to interact with Africans in the diaspora in the Americas across the world. And that could severely limit our objectives overall. Um,
Yeah, you are right. I know we did an episode called "What Is Ideology," so definitely tune into that episode. A few episodes back, you probably have to go in our library and find it. But
deep in the archives.
Yeah, deep in the archives. So I know we've talked about this essentially, but I just wanted to correlate it with this topic here in organizing. But yeah, I agree with all the sentiments you laid out. Essentially, that's the same thing for me. So like ideology obviously guides your actions. It's a set of thoughts that guides action. Essentially. So if for any reason, or for any instance where people join your organization, you know, they're going to come in and be like, you know, at some point, whether it's like early on, later on, whatever, like, why am I doing this? You know, like, what's the point of this work? Like, you know, you need to, and then I think ideology, well, I know ideology guides that framing and gives you that framing to understand, oh, this is why I'm doing it. You know, these set of thoughts and ideas, you know, I find to what I want to see essentially, and it guides my actions into do those things. So I think that's why it's important, because you have people who join organizations, and, you know, a lot of us are raised under these bourgeois institutions, under bourgeois ideology. And, you know, this is the masses, you know, because we're under a capitalistic society where it breeds that. So when we get into organizations, we have to have an ideology back and to reorient. If it's a revolutionary ideology, yes, it's going to reorient your thoughts and your thought patterns into a more revolutionary frame of mind, essentially. And without that, you're going to have people who espouse a lot of those bourgeois ideologies that we've been indoctrinated with, growing up in these type of capitalistic societies. So we need something, obviously, if you're, and I'm talking solely to revolutionary organizations, more so socialist organizations that are looking to achieve socialism. Now, in that aspect, obviously, we're looking for a totally liberated and unified Africa under scientific socialism. So that's why ideology is important for one who's looking to join an organization. So I think the other aspect to it, as well as methods, methods is how you go about implementing the world you want to see. So, you know, obviously methods can change over time, right? Because conditions change too. So if you go about how you go about it, you know, same way we do it now, A-APRP, like how we go about organizing, you know, maybe a little different, or it definitely is different from how we did it like 40, 30 years ago, all right? But doesn't mean that our principles have changed. But methods, essentially, it should, to a certain point, change, because understanding dialectics, things change all the time. And then, obviously, especially over the course of 5-10 years, things are going to change. And, you know, because now we're in a more digital age. Not saying that we don't go in person and organize too. We definitely do that. You know, we still go, but and do that in, you know, in person. But we also live in a digitalized age where you know, we need, you know, join Zoom calls, especially with COVID, right? Like, we wouldn't have been effective trying to organize in person, especially given, and, you know, given the reality of like not trying to spread COVID. You know, it was better suited that we try to find other ways to do that. So a lot of it has to do with the internet, you know, but now that restrictions have been lifted in certain places, even though there's contradictions with that, because, you know, there's still a high, you know, mortality rate with COVID and everything, but restrictions are being lifted, and, you know, we're getting back to, you know, some of us in some certain respective areas are getting back to in-person organizing. But I said all of that to say that, you know, methods can change, but it's just a way of trying to enact what you want to, what your ultimate goal is or objective is, or enact, you know, a certain I guess actions, I would say, to help you guys lead to that objective. So kind of ties into ideology on like why are we doing this. This is the bigger picture. So we're doing this for to see a totally liberated and unified Africa under scientific socialism. So this is why we do that, is because of that line, because that's the bigger picture. That's the, you know, the bread and butter for everything. You know, that's everything to us. So whatever your organization objective is, and once again, it kind of ties into the material conditions. You know, what do you see as like a ultimate sovereignty or liberation for oppressed people, whether it's in your locale, whether you're talking about a specific group, whether it's like, you know, Africans or whatever. How do you see that for those group set of people? I guess also which I was going to add on to this too as well. What role do we see like propaganda taking place with this as well? Like, how does that fit into this picture of like organizing and doing organizing work as well? And then also possibly even self-criticism, positive criticism, and political education.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we consider propaganda basically uh, anything that tries to change or justify like your worldview, or like give information about the world as it is. So we would view like an advertisement as propaganda. We would view like a textbook or Instagram post or like anything as propaganda. So we understand basically most things as propaganda because it's a form of media or form of communication uh, that tries to change the way that you understand the world. And so in general, we consider the role that propaganda would play is basically spreading and sharing the ideology and objectives. Um, and the political education would, for the most part, do the same thing. So like political education and propaganda are tools that we would be using to share our ideology, our methods, and our objectives with the communities that we're in. So in places where we may not be physically present, so like let's say like somebody's home, we can share an article or like share information about like think about situations that are happening to other members of the community. That way, even when people are like not among like everybody, uh, with information, they can learn more about like what we do, about what our goals are, and it can help further organization. With political education, I think that's historically has been done like among a group of people and within a group of people. That helps provide like ideological consistency. With political education, it's a lot of it is like uh, teaching about politics, teaching about how the government works, teaching about different like historical things. So like for example, us sharing information about like freedom fighters that have been, or us sharing information about this is how like the government works, or sharing information about just different like individuals who have fought for and organized amongst the people for independence. Uh, it allows us to understand what happened in the past and allows us to understand and like analyze their methods and how they reached their objectives through their methods or whether they did. Um, Principled criticism is uh, basically criticism that's has the goal of like producing like change. So like it's not really like a oh this person didn't really like the color green because you can't really like produce anything out of it. It's usually like a analyzing. It's usually a form of analyzing a system or like a set of actions, ideology, or objectives that has been pursued in the past, and trying to analyze it to understand, okay, what were the positives of it, what were the negatives of it, and why, and then using that information to help plan for what we today would do, and help plan for what we today should like, uh, how we should organize today. Um, and so criticism is helpful so that we don't just copy and paste what has happened in the past. Uh, we don't want to do that because the material conditions, although similar, can be very different from what they are today. So, for example, with what Sadiq mentioned, with COVID, a lot of stuff are now virtual in a space where in the past most things have typically been in person. So if we were to just copy and paste having like regardless of what's happening now with COVID, having circles or having meetings in person, that can very much complicate the objectives that we're trying to achieve. Uh, but with principled criticism and with analyzing, okay, like what works, what can we do now based upon the lessons that were learned in the past. We can shift our methods or shift the ways in which we do things uh, while keeping our ideology consistent and while still achieving our objectives.
Bars. Yeah. I would. Yeah. Once again, hit it on the head. So I definitely agree. Because I was just throwing my 2 cents by saying, yeah, PE, political education. I know for me, man, this worked wonders for me when joining the A-APRP. I've said this in various episodes. Talked about my journey on a few episodes for those who have watched. But yeah, I came in, reading, but kind of reading in isolation and just like trying to formulate. I didn't grow up in a revolutionary household. I grew up like most of us do, going through from kindergarten to 12 in these various school educational systems in the state in the United States under capitalism. And we know what that breeds. It breeds reactionary ideology, bourgeois ideology. So, I grew up under that. And then over the course of years, try to just navigate and find my own way of trying to understand things. And I came across the autobiography of Malcolm X. It changed me. But once again, I was doing the isolation, trying to like figure things out on my own. And just randomly coming across like various texts, trying to piece things together. But then wasn't until I joined the A-APRP and I become settled in and have a firm understanding on a lot of things due to the PE and adopting an Nkrumah's Therese ideology and utilizing the dialectical and historical materialism to form an analysis is definitely done wonders for me. So I think I'm a true testament to what PE can do, political education, and how it should be done in kind of what you were saying, Winfred, in community with other folks, in an organizational setting, because not only, and I think Secretary talks about this too as well, in Strategy and Tactics of the Revolution, is how you further thought within that social group. Because essentially you may have a view on it. You have 10 people in a room who may have other 10 different views on what has been read. You guys could break it down and then you gauge an ideological struggle, which is necessary and needed to further your understanding and your political education on things. Because if you do things in isolation, a lot of times some people get into confirmation bias. Some people get into, just not critically reading things. So in a way, they kind of just stuck in a narrow view sometimes. Not all the time. Some people, that you may get lucky and just find ways through trial and error on your own. But I think you get a lot further doing it in a social setting within an organization for those things. So, and then I would also say propaganda is very important to spread, kind of like you were saying too, Winfred, to spread the ideology of the party, to influence thought in a way, spark it. I did, like, for instance, with everything going on in the world and inflation and, the whole NATO and Ukraine situation and Russia, obviously the narrative dominant in society is, once again, bourgeois ideology. So a lot of things we take in from mass media as to be the truth is normally either mostly one-sided or on the side of the imperialists and capitalists 10 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. So obviously, if you're in a revolutionary organization, you want to spread your propaganda to get people to provoke thought and to have people think like, okay, like, what is this about? Let me do my research or let me look into this, and then get them to join your org, your group or whatever, right? So I think that's an important piece to organizing, because without that, and it also gives visibility. Because if you're doing community work and you're doing stuff, but people don't know who you are, maybe people forget, or like, you may come across when they forget to even ask who you are. If you gave them that piece of propaganda, whether it's like, a little pamphlet, t-shirt, whatever, with like messaging on it, whatever, that could always stick with them. That could resonate with them. It gives visibility. Whether they pass out the pamphlet too, like they share with other friends and, whatever, then people start to know. And to be honest, notoriety isn't a bad thing. Like, I know notoriety sometimes, like how some people view it, given the social media age, it's like, oh yeah, you're just trying to be famous and like, in this context, it's very good. You want people to join your organization. You want people to understand and know who your organization is about, right? To get them into that organization. And I think in a way, like, we could even learn from the Panthers, because we've seen that once they were on TV and they did the march to the courthouse and everything, that was one of the things that gave them notoriety to, the people in the community knew who they are, but to the masses, and I think that kind of helped, and they understood to utilize mass media in that way at that time, is to, okay, let's get in front of the cameras, and, we can utilize that to bridge out what we're doing nationally. And that's a part of the reason why they were able to build, chapters and stuff like that. And once again, I'm not reducing it to say just because they got on TV, they were able to do that, because obviously they were on ground pushing propaganda and doing other than struggling, but I think that is a component too, to take into account for, to push, your party line out to the masses as well. So, and then also lastly, I think I will say self-criticism and positive criticism is definitely needed to check certain behaviors in a principled manner. It just combat liberalism, I would say, in the organization too. If you're not a liberal organization, if you're a revolutionary organization, you want to combat that and make sure things. And then obviously, you're not trying to take, once again, principled critiques. You're not attacking someone's like character or like personal attacks. You're attacking the various actions, how we correct and make it better, essentially. Because if you're just going to allow all types of mistakes and all types of madness in your organization, then that could essentially hijack the org, the principles of the org, and it's going to run rampant. It's going to become a bigger problem. So I think it's best, of course, to do that. One of the main peoples who we've seen espouse this through their orgs as revolutionary leaders was Mao Zedong and Kwame Ture as well, the PDG. So yeah, I think that's essentially, positive criticism obviously enables those good actions that we've seen a person display to keep them, on that same track too as well. But self-criticism is a way to combat liberalism and make sure that those mistakes aren't being seen repeatedly throughout the org. So yeah, I guess one question that I think we always hear is, or you may see is, how does one like go about starting an org, with not a lot of money, right? Like they'd be like, oh yeah, I need money. I'm gonna get the money first. I need to get the bag, right? So I guess the second part to that question is like, how does one, because I don't want to be remiss and act like, no, you don't need any money in the org, but like, I guess the second part to that is like, how would one go about raising money in the org to fund different campaigns? Because obviously getting propaganda, and it's to a certain extent, even though it's not cost intensive, you still need money to, produce propaganda to a certain degree, whether it's printing or if you want to buy, certain merchandise and stuff like that. But I guess if you could just tackle those two things, I think that'd be good to get into.
I guess as a side note, I'd say that like if someone is to, I don't think it's a good idea to wait until like you have quote unquote enough money to begin organizing, because like to some extent it'll never be enough money. There are some places where a 10 pack of chicken is $20, where it used to be $4. Uh, and like their gas is now like I think like $7, $8 in some places, where last year it was like maybe like $3 or $4. And so the prices of things are always gonna go up. And so there always be a need of, oh wait, I need more money to even get the same stuff that you were looking for in the past. Um, and there are a lot of like relatively free ways to organize amongst the community. You can't really do everything that you'd want to do, but there are some stuff that are like relatively like cheaper. Uh, so like for example, like even having like social gatherings where you can do political education. Uh, for that, like you can find a PDF of a book online. You can watch like YouTube videos of people analyzing it. You can get people together, like maybe make like maybe like spend some money on like snacks or food, or even just asking like your local like church or community center to hold a space where people can all be together, and then do your political education through there, or even have it like in a virtual environment like Zoom or something. Um, and then like from that like from that like free point of political education, you can ask people what their needs are, try to figure out a couple objectives that people would want to do, and I think from that point, it might be easier to garner donations in order to achieve those specific goals. um, I'd also say that it's probably better to be as transparent as possible about where that money is going. Because if people in the community are giving their money to you, then they want to know like what is it actually being used for.
Facts. Yeah, always. I think that's definitely a key, is being transparent in where that money's going. But circle back to some of the other points you made in relation to, starting an org with no money, whatever. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like it will never be enough money, because I guess to any org, we will all want to start off with $1 million, gazillion
Yeah.
dollars, because then we'll have so much resources to put out. But yeah, there will be no limitation. You would just always want to keep getting more and more and more money. So you better off as a student just starting off, from a grassroots level, starting off just building relationships with people in the in the community, creating an org, working off those relationships, and over time, obviously, getting funding through whether it's like selling merchandise or selling food or whatever. And obviously, try to do these things at reasonable prices if you can. I know you need to bring in a profit margin too, to be able to get the funding you need. So, but yeah, I think all these things initially there's a lot of workarounds. Kind of at the same point you made. If you know someone who maybe in the org that does graphic designing, that's a good place to start. At least help build a logo. If you want to have a logo, at least at first, build a website, whatever. There's certain skills that we have in a lot of our communities that a lot of times aren't utilized for this type of work that could be, and people who are willing to use that for this type of work. So it's best to leverage that at first, if you can possibly. And I think it's more rewarding when you put your efforts into doing this type of work, than having to do it for some job that most of us hate doing anyway. At least we're doing some of the work we're doing could be towards liberation. At the end of the day. So, but yeah, so I think starting off from the foot of, or the notion that like I need all this gazillion dollars, I can't help my people unless I have money is a false premise, because I'm pretty sure the A-APRP wasn't started off with 10,000, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000. That wasn't the case when we started. At least I don't believe so. So, it started from a grassroots level, and Yeah. I think I feel like we hit a lot of major points in this dialogue. I don't know if there's anything you had top of mind that you deemed important that we should discuss in relation to the organizing.
Yeah, I think one last note that I have is that like it's important to remember that like anybody can be an organizer. Like a lot of it is just like bringing together the people in your neighborhood or community, like reaching out to them, trying to understand, well, basically connecting with people, and trying to create something with the people that helps the community.
Facts. And yeah, we'll implore you, those who are listening, to join an organization to yourself. You know, if not, then do what we talked about here. Create your own organization. If you want to join the A-APRP, link will be in the description box. If you're interested in trying to join us. But I would also like to say that we are not the only podcast out. We have several podcasts as well that we do that's also in the description box. I know we have I'm going to miss a few. I always get this, those who listen, I know I always get this wrong because there's so many podcasts that we have. I know the A-APRP Southwest, aka New Mexico chapter, has one that they do. I believe it's every Thursday that they do theirs. We also have the comrade Ajamu and his lovely daughter Shakur, who do theirs every Sunday. Obviously, the Pantsula Podcast, which is ours, we do ours every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, and there's a few others. Like I said, I know I'm missing, but definitely be in the description box and look to tune into all the several podcasts that we have that we're doing. This is our form of, propaganda. Hence our conversation earlier. And we also have our site, which ties into the last topic we discussed, which is like funding. We have our Forward Ever shop where you could cop, not only are you putting money towards a revolutionary organization seeking to liberate and unify Africa under scientific socialism, but you are also copping the flyest gear out. Want to
The
look
players.
fly? The cleanest, the meanest stuff, baby. So yeah, if you want to look fly and also support revolution, definitely be sure to click that link and cop as much pieces as you can. We should have some new pieces up there on the site in the upcoming months too as well. So look out for that. And also follow our social media page, which is Forward Ever Shop as well. I believe it was started pretty recently. So definitely support. So definitely appreciate you guys tuning in to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast. Once again, you can catch us every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we look forward to catching you on the next episode. Yeah. But until then, forward ever.
Forward ever.